Hello, welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be doing a follow-up on my Magic Mary Radial review and explaining why I swapped out my radial rear tyre for one with the older generation Schwalbe casing. So my radial review did pretty well for a video on my channel, and if you are one of the people who watched it, thank you very much. It's much appreciated. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll link it down below, but to summarise that review, I really liked the Magic Mary Radial tyres, but I did find them slightly frustrating in certain riding situations, especially climbing, as I think the radial casing gave them an increase in rolling resistance compared to a conventional casing mountain bike tyre. Now, I got a lot of comments and questions on that video, so for the first half of this one, I'm going to start by answering some of them and hopefully making everything that little bit clearer. The vast majority of comments were asking what PSI I was running with these tyres. Now, I did actually put this in the description of the video, but it's probably something I should have addressed in person in the video. Essentially, I was running 5 PSI more front and rear in these tyres than I would with a conventional casing tyre. But getting to that PSI wasn't straightforward. So I actually started running these tyres with way too much pressure. I went up to about 35 PSI front and rear, my thinking being, while out on the trail, it's much easier to reduce pressure than it is to add pressure to your tyres, and that way I could more quickly find a pressure that worked for me. So the first day riding these tyres was actually in Rotorua, and for my first lap I had way too much air in these tyres. They felt horrible, I was getting way too much vibrations through my hands and through my feet, and it was definitely down to the tyres because nothing else has changed on the bike. And essentially throughout a day's riding, I gradually reduced the pressure till they got to a point that I was happy with. And I think that is the way everyone should set up their tyres. Don't just put a PSI in because you've read that that is the right PSI for the tyres. Do it by feel and then work out what that PSI is afterwards, because if you're just chasing a number for the sake of a number, it's not really the point. Saying that, the PSIs I settled on were 26 front and 29 rear, which is about 5 PSI more than I would typically run. Oh, I should say at this point, like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. I've realised I only ever say this at the end of the videos, and that's not typically the best tactic. So if you're enjoying this, please like and subscribe. It'd make a massive difference. We're trying to get some momentum behind this YouTube thing at the moment. So if you want to subscribe, it'd help me out massively, but if not, no worries. So there's another load of questions of why I went with this specific tyre setup. I really wanted to try out the radial casing tyres, and I've previously run dual Magic Mary tyres before, and there was a slight bit of nostalgia with that. I wanted to go back to dual Magic Marys and just see how they rode. Also, I wanted to run a dual radial setup, and for that, the options for rear tyres were not great. So my other rear tyre option was pretty much an Albert, and I don't like the look of that tread for being a specific rear tyre. I'm sure it's a fantastic tyre, and I've had loads of people in the comments saying they've had great success with it, but for me, it doesn't look like it's going to offer the sort of braking grip that I really like in a rear tyre. Not that the Magic Mary does particularly, but I just wanted the same tyre front and rear because it's quite a fun thing to do. It is quite economical if you're just going to keep buying a new front tyre, moving the existing front tyre to the rear, like that's nice, and I did have that planned, but as you can tell from the video title, it's not quite worked out that way, and I have swapped out the rear tyre. But that was my thinking. So we ended up with the gravity casing for these tyres. Ideally, in the front, I would have run the trail casing in ultra soft, but I could not find that tyre in New Zealand, so that's why that tyre isn't up front. And we're running a gravity in the rear because I've run the previous generation trail casing from Schwalbe in the rear before and had some really quite dramatic punctures in places I didn't expect to have punctures. So that's why we're running gravity in the rear, and the gravity in the front is purely for logistical reasons. That being said, I've still got the gravity tyre up front and I still really like it. I quite like the feeling of a heavier front tyre. It's not something I've fully experimented with before, and it feels really good. It feels like it deadens some of the vibrations, and when you're moving it about a little bit in the air, there's some nice gyroscopic effect to it, I think. I'm not obviously throwing mad whips and doing bar spins or anything, but when you move it a bit in the air, it feels good. It feels nice. So there was another load of comments on that video asking what bikes and what riding situations these tyres would work well for. And quite simply, they would work fantastically well in any situation where grip is your priority and rolling resistance isn't something you care about as much. On an e-bike, for example, these tyres would be absolutely incredible. They have so much grip, and because you're not the only thing powering your bike up the hill, rolling resistance probably isn't going to be such a big concern. Another situation these tyres would be incredible for is if you were racing an enduro or any sort of gravity-based race. They have so much grip and they're so predictable and they're so forgiving. They really would be a valuable asset to have on your bike in one of those situations. So if all you care about is grip on your bike and not so much about rolling resistance, get the Gravity Casing Radial Schwalbe Magic Mary tyres, stick them front and rear. You will have a fantastic time because they are brilliant, but they don't roll very quickly. And that's pretty much the gist of it. That's what it comes down to. They grip, but they roll slow. You can't have everything. So earlier I mentioned climbing performance, and to be honest, that's the main reason I've moved to a different rear tyre. I do quite a lot of pedaling, and while I love shuttling and big days of descending, my favourite rides are ones where it's just pedal power getting me to the top of the hill. A lot of people in the comments of the last video suggested I try out the Tacky as a rear tyre, and that's what I've done. The tyre I went for is a 29-inch Tacky in the Super Gravity casing in ultra soft compound. So a pretty sticky, pretty gravity specific rear tyre, and one that I've been really happy with so far. Also, I'm aware a radial version of this tyre is definitely in the pipelines just based on what I've seen at the World Cups. And to be honest, this tyre in a radial casing would be incredible, but I will talk more about why that will be later on. So straight away, I noticed that the Tacky rolled quicker. On hard pack climbs and pavement, it was way easier to pedal uphill. But feeling things on the bike is one thing. I wanted to put these tyres against the clock. I'm not going to compare them on the climbs because I don't have a power meter and that wouldn't really be a fair test. But on descents, I feel like putting these two tyres against the clock can offer some valuable insights, even if the timing device I was using wasn't exactly the most scientific. So the trails used for this test was one flowing blue trail, which I thought would favour probably more the Tacky and one steeper black trail, which I thought would favour more the Magic Mary. I thought I'd try two trails just to see how the tyres perform in different riding situations, and in case anyone's wondering, these trails were ridden on the same day, in the same afternoon, on the same bike. To my surprise, the Tacky was faster on both trails. So on the blue trail, the Magic Mary was 2 minutes and 32, and the Tacky was 2:28. So not a massive difference there, but it was a trail I knew really well, and I was pushing pretty much the same on both rides. And to have a 4-second increase in time is pretty impressive. It's pretty noticeable. On the black trail, the times were, the Magic Mary was 1 minute 34, and the Tacky was 1 minute 33. So as suspected, the difference between those tyres on more of a steeper, gravity-oriented trail weren't as noticeable, but the Tacky was still quicker. It was really interesting riding these two tyres back to back because the difference in casing definitely is something you notice. It feels like they're getting their grip in very different ways. The radial casing tyres feel like they're sort of conforming and smushing into the ground, and that's how they're getting their grip, while the older generation casings feels like they're cutting into the ground, and that's how it's getting its grip. And that was a sensation that was actually really noticeable when I took the bike out for its first ride. It felt like the front tyre, which was still a radial casing, was smushing and sort of conforming to the ground, while the rear tyre really felt like it was cutting and digging into the ground. That goes on to cornering technique as well. It felt like you did need to get the Tacky onto its side knobs to get the best out of it in cornering situations. And while that was actually quite a strange sensation to have tyres that feel really different front and rear for the first ride, it isn't something I've noticed since then. Like on every single ride since I've changed tyres, it's not something I've thought about, and it's something you get used to pretty quickly. But when you're riding them back to back, you're definitely going to notice a difference. Compared to the Magic Mary, the Tacky definitely breaks out a lot more if you just slap it into a corner and hope for the best. For example, it also definitely got more loose on one particular section of trail compared to the Magic Mary, when I was doing time testing. It was sort of off camber and rooty, and every time I rode over it, the back would kick out a little bit. And then as I continued down the trail, the tyres would get in line and we'd be fine. On the Tacky Chan, it kicked out way more. And that's quite a fun sensation when it's a rear tyre, because that's sick. That's like drifting. That's cool. That's a sensation that I absolutely love on a mountain bike. And that's what makes a Tacky Chan a really fun tyre. It's quick, it's got loads of grip, but it's also happy to get loose. You just have to be more considered and more concise with your body movements and what you want the bike to do. Also, it's got surprisingly good braking grip. So while it doesn't look like a DHR or a Big Betty, it still holds on in steeps really well when you're on the brakes. I've taken this tyre down some really steep, quite spicy trails, and I've been actually really impressed with how well it's held on when you're just trying to control your speed. It does really, really well. And despite it not being a specific rear tyre tread pattern or rear tyre design, it does really well for braking performance, and I've been really impressed with it in that regard. So I think this tyre is actually slightly misunderstood. Schwalbe described this tyre as the fastest downhill tyre for maximum performance. And that makes it sound like it's only good for riding really gnarly downhill tracks and it won't really perform anywhere else. But actually, because of how quick rolling this tyre is and how it does have quite a lot of grip, I think this would actually make a really great trail tyre, especially in the trail casing. Like, you'd have a really quick rolling tyre, which still has plenty of grip. You would just need to be more of a precise or more of a purposeful rider in your movements and in the way you corner. I also think this tyre in radial casing will be absolutely brilliant. So, although in my last video, I said that the radial casing doesn't roll as quickly as the older generation tyre, I stand by that statement. However, this tyre is very fast rolling. So with the radial casing, it would slow it down a bit, but you put it into just the soft compound rather than the ultra soft, you could probably get a bit of that rolling resistance back. And this tyre with the radial casing, it would definitely make up for some of the shortcomings that this tyre has and probably make it way more forgiving for a wider spectrum of riders. So this is definitely a tyre where you need to be on top of it, you need to be getting it on its side and getting grip that way. But with the radial casing, it's going to conform more to the ground, and it's probably going to make it much more predictable and probably make it much more friendly and approachable for a wider variety of riders while still rolling relatively quickly. So when this tyre comes out in radial casing, I might try it out. I'll be really curious to try it. I've definitely fell down a bit of a rabbit hole in terms of casings and tyres recently. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, and while I'm really happy with my current tyre setup, there's always room for improvement. That's the beautiful thing about mountain biking. No matter what upgrade you make, there's still room for improvement, and that's kind of why I love it. I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got this far, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Maybe leave a comment if you've got some thoughts about the Tacky Chan or radial casing tyres, or any questions you want to ask me, just drop it down below. I'll be happy to help, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.